For those that are wondering if they should be able to hear something, if you can hear my voice, you're good. And we are doing a recording, Kate announced, so that should be available. Kate, do you know when that will be available to participants? Can we email it after the event?
Yes. Yep. We'll email it tomorrow, probably tomorrow. we got that meeting tomorrow, but tomorrow, if not Wednesday. Got a few person calling me still, looking to get in at the last minute here. All right, what are we up to? Oh, it's just cut off at 99 plus. We, thanks to DCR's excellent outreach, folks, to the stewardship list, we have 358 registrants. A record, well, not a record for one of DCR's programs, but a record for NRCS. So how many people we got here now?
196.
All right, by 6:30, we should have 350. Hold your horses, just kidding.
Kate, somebody's saying that they can't hear anything right now. My recommendation is if you can't hear anything, maybe you can wait for the recording to come out if your speakers aren't working, but you might also try going up to the 3 dots next to, let's see, at the very top of your screen where it says more, and you might be able to mess with your settings. Sorry if I'm not super techie, but.
And you may be able also to dial in on your phone if you're having audio trouble as well.
Great suggestion.
All right, well, it's 6:05. I think this is when Mike Downey comes out with his first joke. And I suppose the late arrivers might have to listen to the recording for the first bit they missed. That's what the DVR is for, right? Right. Give you a few more minutes. Actually, maybe for viewing pleasure, I'll give you the stats on who signed in. For those of you who are already here, I really appreciate your being on time and interest in our program today, our presentation. Glad again to partner with DCR. Mike Downey's here and Allison Wright, both esteemed service foresters. The audio is working. Perfect. Thank you, Julie. Try dialing in on your phone or tapping. Well, the good thing is we got the recording, so. Okay. Well, probably we got to get going. 6:06 here. You think, folks? Yeah. Okay.
I think so.
Yeah. All right. So again, Kate Parsons here. I work out of the state office for the federal United States Department of Ag, Natural Resources Conservation Service. At AMHERST, my responsibilities are really more on the grazing and agronomy side, cover crops, soil health. So we have all sorts of resources and technical assistance and financial assistance, but helping out here with the Conservation Stewardship Program and forest planning. So I got some of my colleagues here, and DCR. So just a quick rundown of the agenda. DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation, is going to give some updates. I hear we have an exciting new program we're going to hear about. Also, like I said, the NRCS assistance that we offer with the CSP, the Conservation Stewardship Program, we'll refer to that now as CSP. Some example payments, how that works this year. And thankfully, we got a wonderful landowner to present today. He listened to the webinar last year that we had in September and was interested and signed up and got a contract. So we're going to hear from Rick Marble out of Worcester County. Franklin County, sorry. And I just wanted to, we had, I think we had 350 people register. Of those, there were 285 that responded. Not all the 350 are forest landowners, lots of partners and other folks. But 285 responded that they have forest land, at least answered the question for forest land. And this is kind of the breakdown that we have. So you can take a look at that. I think I saw the average forest landowner, private forest landowner, is 57 acres in the state, something on that order. So that kind of falls in line with the majority of our participants, 100 participants in that range. So glad to have you all here. And 231 of those 285 have forest management plans. So we can, we have financial assistance through our program, and DCR does as well. So we'll get this started with DCR going to share their slides and present, and then we'll come back and go on with CSP.
Thank you, Kate. Really appreciate that, and really appreciate the time that everybody has taken out of their busy day to kind of come here and listen to Kate and Allison and myself and others and share their stories. So really looking forward to that. Give me 1 second. So Allison and I are really excited to share with you tonight really a whole suite of programming that we have, as well as financial assistance that we have through the Working Forest Initiative, the Forest Stewardship Program, and everything that Service Forestry has to offer. Tonight is also a really special night for us at Service Forestry because we're rolling out a brand new program. And to be honest with you, we've really worked tirelessly on this new program, and we're really excited to share that with you. You guys are going to be the first audience to hear this, so Allison and I are really delighted to be able to share that with you first here tonight. So we're going to start kind of where we generally start with many of these conversations for these types of events and webinars, which is kind of just really kind of getting back to kind of where I got my start in forestry, which was Dave Kittredge at UMass, and many others as well. Brett Butler's an important piece as well to kind of understanding, how you guys as landowners think about your land. And, we utilize a lot of things to kind of better understand and build programming for you. And one of the major ways we learn about you is not just by talking and listening to you, but also with a survey that's done called the National Woodland Owners Survey. And that helps us understand what drives decision-making on the landscape, how you guys view as landowners and how you view your land. And really, this has been for a very, very long time where amenity values, things like beauty and scenery and privacy and wildlife habitat and recreation, those amenity values really drive home to us what is important to you when we, as foresters, are listening to you at your dining table or out in the woods when you invite us out and have a walk in the woods. So you know, you've done remarkably well to steward your land all these years, and I'm glad that we can offer some programming through our program at DCR as well as what NRCS can provide. So one of the foundation pieces to most of the programming is really the planning process or the stewardship plan, or in some cases, if you have a forest management plan, if you're in Chapter 61A or 61B or Chapter 61 for that matter, you know, realistically, that stewardship plan is really the foundation of the planning process, but it's also the entry point for many of the programs that we're going to hear about later from NRCS. So really that planning process, either through NRCS, through their EQIP 106 plans, through our forest stewardship program, through DCR, and other planning mechanisms, really it's there for a primary purpose, and that's to help you make better informed decisions as a landowner. And you can see this data point comes from the Woodland Owner Survey, and it just shows kind of how we've really, through the excellent work of the consulting forester community and some of the partners that we have through NRCS and land trusts and others that have really driven home the message that, you know, planning is a really important part of owning your land. And, you know, we've really flipped that number from 2006, where, you know, 34% of the landowners had a management plan, and now we're up over, you know, nearly to 60% here in 2018, and tonight it would appear that most of you have a plan. So that message is helping. I think that information that you're gaining from that planning process is hopefully useful to you and your family, and that's really what drives us each and every day to kind of help, at least from the service forestry program point of view. So, you know, with that is as we noticed in the couple of slides ago, is that landowners hold multiple objectives kind of simultaneously, and it's also important to recognize that no one size fits all approach to managing your property is ever going to work, because you and your family make unique decisions, and not every family is the same across the landscape. So, you know, that one size fits all approach is also something to think about, important to think about with regard to climate. And I don't think we could take a one size fits all approach to kind of mitigating the impacts of climate on our farms as well as our forests. So, you know, we recognize, you know, this again came out of the Woodland Owner Survey, how important, you know, not only understanding what your goals and objectives are, but also what your concerns are, because concerns speak directly to how do we offer you and programming that's useful to you, because those programs hopefully address a concern that you're facing. You know, and here is an example where Allison will get into more detail about is this climate forestry program that we're slowly building here at DCR is really there to address a concern that's been voiced, where, you know, nearly 56% of the family forest landowners have expressed that climate is either a concern or a great concern. So I'm going to pass the presentation next over to Allison. She's going to take over from here, but basically I just want to say that we couldn't get to where we are today. You know, we've been working on this climate forestry program now for over 5 years, and it really is done collaboratively, and it couldn't be done really without the support of all these folks, along with probably others that I may have left off, unfortunately. But this captures the amount of effort and collaboration that has built this climate forestry program. Allison, all you.
All right, thanks, Mike. Thanks for the introduction and a great lead up to what we've been doing in climate forestry at DCR. I've been working with our climate forestry team since we began this project, as Mike just mentioned, somewhere in late 2019, 2020, and that feels like ages ago now, right? So all hands are on deck for this project. This is serious stuff. Our DCR Service Forestry Program has worked with our local and federal partners on the development of the climate forestry program for private forest landowners. Our partners at the federal level include the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, and at the local level, Mass Audubon, New England Forestry Foundation, and the Mass Woodlands Institute have been at the table for all of these years. So we've been working on 3 separate projects with climate forestry in mind over these years. The first of these is the Forest Stewardship Climate Plan. The components of that plan, the directions for the preparation of that plan, climate-informed training booklets for the foresters, and finally, trainings for the foresters. We have also been working with timber harvesters to better understand how climate change has affected their operations, and we are working on training that educates them about climate change. And tonight we'll announce more support, as Mike just mentioned, about enhanced best management practices that will help to mitigate the on-site impacts due to heavier rainfalls and shorter winters. Also, coming in March, DCR will host a Forest Climate and Innovation Forum for landowners and forest-based businesses. And the third project is where we're really going to focus some time at the end. Mike will come back and talk about how we've developed climate-informed practices to support enhancing resilience of your forests. Go ahead, Mike. You can go to the next slide. Excellent. So the Forest Stewardship Program, as you know, has always been about educating and engaging forest landowners. Our group has developed 3 new guides for landowners to learn about climate forestry and to help you all set goals. The first guide helps you, the landowner, to develop ideas about what your goal could be, and the other 2 guides are about climate forestry. There are 2 ways you as a forest landowner can help respond to climate change in your woods. Our guides focus on learning about these 2 ways, these 2 goals. One is to manage to support forest adaptation, and the other is to manage for forest carbon, or both, on your land. All of these guides can be found on our DCR Service Forestry website. You can go ahead and advance, Mike. Our trainings for foresters are focused on training them to identify how a landowner's forest might be vulnerable and at risk due to potential impacts from climate change. In the Forest Stewardship Climate Plan, foresters link this information to actions forest landowners can take to support climate adaptation or forest carbon, or both, using forest management practices. Go ahead and advance, Mike. So what's our end goal? I mean, there's a lot of complicated things happening here, right? What should our forest look like? What is our desired future condition of that forest that's climate adapted? In many forests, it will be the goal of creating high forest complexity. So what is high forest complexity? And it's long. I'm going to read it because you really have to focus on each attribute of this definition. So is promoting forests that have a diversity of tree species, ample tree regeneration of future adapted species, vigorous trees of various sizes and ages, a variety of tree arrangements, and an appropriate amount of deadwood gives forests a complex structure and helps them withstand and recover from stressors. So how are we going to get there? As you can imagine, there's a lot of work to be done in any given forest stand over a long period of time in order to achieve a condition of such complexity. In many forests, this will take several entries and maybe several decades for that matter. We will need to implement forest practices that complement the desired condition, and there lies the urgency to start work now. We understand that climate and forests and the issues around these topics are complicated. And in order to help landowners learn more about their plan and the options they have to support climate adaptation and mitigation. We have cost share available to pay for the landowner's consultation with their consulting forester. We have funds to assist with 4 hours of consultation before the forest stewardship climate plan is written, and we have assistance to fund for 2 hours of consultation after the plan is completed. So at this point, I'd like to have Mike come back to introduce you to our new Climate Stewardship Incentive Program.
Mike, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Hopefully you can hear me now. So this is the big moment that we've all been working really hard within the service forestry program towards. I honestly, there hasn't been one service forester that has not put in a maximum amount of effort to create this program. So really proud of the teamwork, really proud of where we've come, and all the work. So realistically, this program, the Climate Stewardship Incentive Program, which we're rolling out as a pilot this year, came out of the Forest's Climate Solutions Initiative. And really the goal of this is to provide some assistance, financial assistance to family forest landowners, municipalities, as well as natural resource professionals in terms of addressing impacts of climate on forests and also helping kind of mitigate some of the things that we're seeing in the forest with regard to climate. So the funding is being provided through the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and that's coming through the Forest's Climate Solutions Initiative. And this program, the Climate Stewardship Incentive Program, will be part of DCR's Working Forest Initiative. So there's going to be a total of 5 practices associated with the Climate Stewardship Incentive Program. These incentives are based upon having a forest cutting plan or proposing to have a forest cutting plan. So really for eligibility purposes, really the driver for this is to have a forest cutting plan, either in the works or approved. We'll take it either way. And then realistically for practice 3 and practice 2, which is the legacy tree retention and the tree marking, those are specific for the folks that we've currently worked with in the Climate Stewardship Program or the Forest Stewardship Climate Plan, if you have one of those. 1, 4, and 5 are open to anybody with a forest cutting plan. So with 5 being mainly specifically for timber harvesters, that's where that money is geared towards in terms of the incentive. So I know Sarah's online tonight, and I'd love for her to maybe she can, towards the end of this evening, she can introduce herself more formally. But Sarah will be the Climate Stewardship Incentive Program lead, and you can see her contact information here. Feel free to use our QR code there. That will take you directly to our application and other fun stuff that we just had posted online tonight. And we are accepting applications tonight, and we will do so until the money runs out. And the deadline to complete the practices that are approved will be on May 31st. So here's the nuts and bolts of what these practices are. So we have a harvest layout practice that provides to a Massachusetts licensed forester the opportunity to lay out a timber harvest, like many of them already do, but now we're providing some assistance to help with that. And so that's the major part of CSIP 1, the harvest layout. We also have a component of that practice where we're also advancing the identification or the extent with flagging or marking of wetland resource areas, filter strips, certified vernal pools, and potential vernal pools as well. So there's some cost share assistance to identify those on the ground. And then, as I mentioned previously, the legacy tree retention and the tree marking for increasing future adapted species and structural diversity, those are for landowners with the Climate Forest Stewardship Plan. And if you don't know much about that, we can definitely link the application for cost share assistance. We have cost share assistance to take. If you have an existing plan, you can update that to a climate plan if you choose. We also have assistance to kind of, if you just want a stewardship plan, you can do it that way too. So we'll link to that application later this evening. But that allows 2 and 3 just allows for the marking purposes, either for the legacy tree retention or the tree marking for future adapted species and structural diversity. I think we'll see a lot of action around the invasive species control. These mirror pretty much what NRCS provides, and they'll probably talk about that later this evening, Kate and others. So we have a heavy, a moderate, and a light. We've also added a light mechanical, which provides folks that have maybe not a whole heck of a lot of invasives, but are looking to maybe target them in a more mechanical way. And then this last practice, which is the BMPs for forest operations. Again, these are geared towards specifically Massachusetts licensed timber harvesters. And this is to kind of address what Allison had made mention earlier about kind of these changing weather patterns and increased precipitation and all these other wonderful things we're experiencing, and how do we still do good work on the ground with really difficult, not only ground conditions, but also difficult weather patterns and climate. So there's different components here. Some involve water bars. Some of them include soil stabilization products like wattles and straw bales and fiber blankets. There's also some seeding allowed after, kind of post-harvest. And then we have what we would call a BMP kit, which is something that would be available really when the job starts or the timber harvest job starts. So it's there and ready to be, ready to be used at a moment's notice with kind of unforeseen or unanticipated emergency or weather events. So that's the big news from DCR. We're really happy. It's been a wonderful experience to kind of deliver this to you guys this evening. I can't say enough about the Service Forestry Program and the team that was able to deliver this to you tonight. It's rather miraculous. But I would say, if you don't know who we are, this is where we are and this is where we work. We are here primarily to deliver technical assistance and outreach. That's what we do. We do also do some regulatory stuff around Forest Cutting Practices Act and Chapter 61 programs. But our main focus is to provide you guys, the landowner, the technical assistance to hopefully better navigate these complex decisions associated with owning and caring for your land. So with that, can't say enough about thanking Allison, right, Hunter, that's her contact information. That's where I can be reached. And Sarah, as I provided earlier, is going to be running the CSIP program. So we're very excited to see that roll out. And if you have any questions, we'll take those, Kate, maybe at the end or now, or however you want to do it.
Probably
you.
mostly at the end. And
Okay.
definitely you and Allison can keep monitoring that chat as Allison and Jen have been helping out with there. Let's see. And you'll have everyone can we'll have the service foresters contact info and the administrator, so certainly have the ability to contact them for questions that we can't get to on this call. So you can see this screen, right? Okay, so Dan Lenthal is my counterpart, my coworker in Amherst, Massachusetts, and I'm going to invite him to give the first part of this presentation and also introduce one of our new employees, I think. So take it away, Dan, and I'm going to advance the slides when he just gives me the quiet next slide or whatever.
Okay, so let's get on with the introduction. New to NRCS is Mike Berry, who was a private consultant in Western Mass for a number of years. You want to log on, Mike? If he's here.
Is Mike given permissions as an organizer, Dan? Because he may not be able to come off of mic or camera.
Okay,
Well, we could do that towards the end. We'll work on that.
okay. Technology, isn't it wonderful? Okay, but anyway, tonight we're going to speak a little about the Conservation Stewardship Program, but we have other programs in NRCS. The focus of the Conservation Stewardship, I have written some of the agency stuff and then the cliff notes down in red. So really, these are 5-year programs that we would enroll with you. And the landowner has to control the land. And the purpose of it is to encourage and maintain conservation stewardship on people's property. And we do ask just one other activity from what you present have. So this is, in a nutshell, developed to reward people for the good work that they've already been doing. So again, this is the Conservation Stewardship Program. So Kate, why don't you go to the next one? Okay, again, this program relies on planning. I'm not sure how many times Mike and Allison mentioned planning, but we also work with the planning side of it to try to assist people, to help people help the land. That's NRCS motto. And there are many steps that we work through as we're doing this. A lot of it's in our head. Wow, we don't discuss, okay, we're going to the next phase, next phase, next phase. No, this is working with individual landowners to accomplish the goals and we call this planning. 9 steps. Okay, Kate, you go to the next. Okay, in context of planning, NRCS, it's a federal agency, lots of acronyms, lots of words that mean something to NRCS. One of them happens to be a resource concern. Now, on this screen, which I don't really want to read, is the definition of a resource concern. But if we want to boil it down, it's something that's not quite up to par in the NRCS concept of things. So the next slide. Okay, I tried to make this a little clearer from a resource concern standpoint with forestry in mind. Okay, so we look at the plants, and in this case, we're talking about the forest stand. What is the present? That's the resource, the plant structure and composition. Now, presently, it's at stage here. What's the present mix of of trees and the size. When I say size, the size of the trees. So that's our resource condition. Where is it now? Planning criteria. Where do we want to go? It might be the desired future condition. That's a term that DCR uses a lot. So a resource concern exists when we're talking about where we are, present evaluation, where we want to go. That gap is considered we are addressing a resource concern. So take the present condition to meet where we want to go, the planning criteria as defined by NRCS. So let's go to the next one, Kate. All right, not to bore anybody, but there are actually 47 resource concerns that we can evaluate on the land, and these 47s have been basically codified in NRCS. There's a lot of overlap between how DCR views forests and other people. But we are looking at several categories in these resource concerns. And at the bottom is probably cut off, but the categories of payments are based on the resource concerns that are up to par. Kate will talk about those things in a little while. So the primary land units, again, I'm speaking of the CSP program. In forest, in the forest side, we are looking obviously at the forest and any other associated land that happens to goes along with the forests. Farmsteads, maybe forest owners have farmsteads, maybe not. It really is something that's used in the forest land production. So as part of CSP, working with a forest owner, we're going to look at least three of those items on your property if you happen to have them. So let's go to the next one, Kate. Okay, forest management plans. It really is recommended that you have a forest management plan. DCR programs, forest management plan. These are plans that, again, they're working with the forests. So as far as the, again, CSP program, if you have several forests scattered around, these should all be included for the CSP program. And the CSP program, as I mentioned, will work hand in hand with your forest management plan to get some of the things done that are listed in the forest management plans, usually outlined in the DCR program. So I see Kate has added a poll question.
Not to slow us down, but let's just see.
Okay.
If it works. Oh no.
Let's see. Does it work? Good job.
It's
We're learning
working
all the time.
Oh really? It's on my other screen, but you guys can see it?
Correct.
Perfect. So we'll just give you a oh, there's someone here that says they can't see it.
Oh.
Oh, the results are coming on my screen. Can you guys see the same thing? Just thought this was relevant,
Why don't you read it for everybody that can't see it?
Oh, okay. I mean, it's just for fun to mix it up, a little interaction, but basically, what forest management activities have you done on your property? Check all that apply. Harvesting for personal use, timber cordwood, patch cut greater than or equal to 5 acres. We call those early successional cuts. Commercial harvesting, and invasive species control. It looks like we're a lot of people harvesting for personal use and the invasives as well. Now, is the results covering the slide?
No, it's in the chat.
Okay, so maybe I'll advance and people can kind of keep answering just out of interest and things that are in your management plan that you could apply for assistance with. So Dan, take it away.
Okay, all right. So lost track of my thoughts there. Inventory and assessment. I mentioned the resource concerns. We work with NRCS staff, works with you to develop the resource concerns that are on your land and the categories for each of these in the program in the land use. So we're not only helping you evaluate the land, we're trying to assess it for the next phase of the program. So would you go to the next slide, Pete? Okay, now, if I were out talking to you or someone else, we're going to ask a group of questions. And now these aren't just to be nosy, but we're trying to work out the resource concern categories that are required by the program. And here are 7 that are listed for the forest land. You know, the concentrated erosion. And I put in red some of the thoughts. We're trying to see if there's observed gullies. Is they stand adequately stocked, overstocked with desirable species? Are there any risks to forest fires? Invasive species, which is quite popular. Compaction. Is there a compacted problem on the soils? Is there enough wildlife habitat? Are wildlife people in both Mass and NRCS really interested in improving the wildlife habitat? And are there signs of erosions? So Kate, go ahead, Kate, to the next one. On the associated agricultural land, we're looking at fewer things, but essentially the same. We're trying to protect the soil, improve the wildlife habitat, and eliminate invasive species. So go to the next one, Kate. All right, now, after a bunch of, again, we work for the government. There's certain evaluation things that go into this. And this is a report following our evaluation on the levels of resources to get you into the program. In this example, you'll notice that I have 4 highlighted in yellow. That represents at the time of application. So in order to be part of the CSP program, you have to have at least 2 categories met at the beginning of the program for that good work you've done. Here, there are presently 4. Check, they passed that first threshold. And are they going to do an additional one to be, again, enrolled in the program? And in this case, there's already 4 marked. So yes, they've passed that condition already. So this person, following our evaluation, again, with them in the program, in context of the program rules, is eligible to enroll in the program. So why don't you go to the next one, Kate? Okay, now we talk about forest stand improvement and some other related things. Now, DCR, forest management plans, they use a number of other terms. So customers or people, those with forest management plans, which I believe many of you have on this call, there might be thinning, timber stand improvement. To us, that falls under the practice of forest stand improvement. Part of the program, CSP, is to enhance the activities, enhance the conditions of the forest, even beyond where we say it's good. So these are called activities, and there are enhancements to do things to a higher level. So if we are using forest stand improvement on the property to adjust the stocking rate, we can do that to a higher level by complementing with a certain activity of reducing stand density to create more of an open stand structure. Okay, so that's, again, maybe a little higher than normal, but that is a lot that's worked out with the DCR forester, with the private forester, and also with, our NRCS staff. So Kate, why don't you go to the next one? Okay, again, common practices. These are NRCS practices, conservation practice, that we might be working with people in the forest. So there's just, in this case, there's just 5. There are many more, but these are the most popular ones. Again, the first one is for the stand development, the stand improvement, brush management, invasive species control. 2 different names there. Early successional habitat, upland wildlife, habitat management, and structures for wildlife. They're all wildlife-based practices within the forest. So why don't you move the next one again? Those are 5 most common ones. And again, I wanted to tie in again some of the forest management and stewardship plans. For those that have them, if you read your forest management plan really closely, the foresters may have any number of one of these things on the left-hand side. Thinning, improved cut, shelterwood, those all fall under our practice of forest stand improvement. So I see Kate has another poll question for those that can see it.
And the polls appear in the chat. So, and you can hit the chat button on the top of your screen, possibly, or Rachel can explain it
The
better.
poll, yeah, the poll is a pop-up, but the results show up in the chat. So
Oh, okay.
it pops up and they answer it and they submit, and then the pop-up goes away and they can see the presentation again.
So I just thought this was a little fun poll question on some your favorite birds. Some of these birds might like different habitat types that you could achieve on your property by doing various forest management treatments or interventions, I guess the word is. So, if you needed a picture, you can pick the pretty one if you're not a fan of any of the species. So if you can humor me and answer the poll question, and we'll just give you a 30-second break here, and Dan a 30-second break to get a drink of water, and then we'll keep the poll going, and we can move on. Now I don't see any, maybe I have to submit so I could see the results. I am going to pick the chestnut-sided warbler. All right, thank you. Now I can see the results. Oh, sweet. Lots of barred owl fans. They must have had a preview. That is suspicious. All right, we'll keep that going for a bit and I'll advance. How many Canada Goose fans? 4%. Must not be the golf courses. Okay.
Okay, back to, there are some enhancements again that I mentioned go on top of our conservation practices. Again, they are all coded. We've got enhancing the understory vegetation, reducing stand density, open structure, and also improves the understory vegetation, and reducing the density of the forest along roads to basically create a fire break and reduce fire hazard. Now, Kate has entered in the dollars per acre as far as the CSP program. These are current, right? I'm assuming that they are, these are the amount of the contract, the agreement, the CSP agreement. This is how much would be added to the agreement per acre for these type of activities that are completed, not just dreamed about, but they have to be completed at that stage. So, Kate, why don't you go to the next one? We're getting more towards that. Can you advance the slide?
Oh, I did.
Oh, okay. It's just a little, okay.
More of the same.
More of the same. Okay, different things. So why don't you go to the next one? And in this case, a little more detail about one of our popular ones that are both forestry and wildlife, where we're enhancing the amount of snags, dead trees, and debris in the forest for wildlife habitat. We start out, again, I mentioned that we're working with NRCS type of people on your land. We start out by a slight inventory. And in this instance, we're trying to estimate what's there to begin with, the desired snags and dead trees per acre. So in this case, we go on to say about how many are needed per acre. These are kind of activities that the landowner can actually do with themselves without involving a forest harvesting company or somebody with a lot of heavy equipment. So why don't we move on to the next one? Okay. Every one of the things that we discuss, be it conservation practice or conservation enhancement, comes with a kind of a how-to guide, a direction, something that explains it and mentions what the requirements are for completing that practice. Again, somewhat homeowner, landowner focused. So we have the enhancements, and go to the next one, Kate. Okay. So there are many. Don't stress about trying to remember how many things there are. I did put a live link in here when people get these out. I figure there's like several hundred of different enhancements, but this is something where you would be working with the soil conservationist or the person in NRCS, perhaps either the service forester or the consulting forester, to really focus in on what your property might need and what you're interested in completing. But anything that really involves cutting down trees has to be recommended in your forest management plan. So why don't we go to the next one, and that may be the last. Oh, okay. So we've worked through the planning process. We've worked with you folks to determine what the before conditions are. That would show up in the kind of like the settle part where it says time of application. And we work with, and we then evaluate whatever's planned, what are the effects of that activity going to have on our evaluation. And in this case, I highlighted the ones that went from not really being met to met in yellow. And those that were, we said that there was acceptable fire management, meeting that, bridging that gap for the resource concern, from the met to exceed. So there are 6 items that with this conservation stewardship program, we enhanced for with the producer in context of this conservation plan and the stewardship program. So 7 kind of things were met at the end. Now, I didn't consider this one at the top because that has to do with the stream, that's an add-in. So anyway, we have 6 great improvements. So why don't you go to the next one? Now, conservation plans, this is just a brief, this is what some of this is what they may look like when you're adding the conservation plan with your forest management plan. There'll be a map and somewhat of a detailed description of what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. Those of you that have worked with us for a while. Okay. And I also mentioned that the directions, here's some more type of directions for forest stand improvement, the actual conservation practice. This is something that's provided by NRCS to the producer and forester if necessary to say, hey, here's kind of what we're expecting, here's how it's to be done and where it's done. So it's directions to apply, directions to use the practice. Okay, so why don't you go to the next one, Kate? And I think this is where Kate pulls in, because she's talking about dollars and money
Yeah.
things. So poll question.
Okay, now I've lost the polls. Someone asked about leaving legacy trees, and there is an enhancement related to kind of carbon storage and soil quality, getting at sequestering carbon, I believe. It's a little funny because it kind of seems like you need to be doing some cutting while you're doing this enhancement, and then you would be specifically marking certain trees that you're going to leave. But reach out to us, to NRCS, as we post the contact information, and we can talk to you about, the different enhancements that you're interested in. That darn barred owl. Let's see. All right. I am gonna vote. Poll question. Whoa. Anyways, I asked Mike Downey how we could have this fun. So he said, well, don't have me tell jokes. You should do poll questions, Kate. Just kidding. So I joke around with my colleagues, coworkers, that I like to get in the weeds. Unfortunately, it's my nature. So I'm going to get in the weeds. It's a little less relevant this year as they increased the minimum payment. But I just wanted to explain how the payment works. Like I said, it was more relevant in the past. And I can't believe, oh no, I screwed up the poll. All right, if you're voting, if you think it's the Chiefs, go with the first New England Patriots. Because Taylor, we don't want Taylor to win. All right. If you're confused, you didn't notice the, yeah, so the Chiefs is the top choice. Sorry. All right, so the CSP, and thank you, Dan, for giving a nice, awesome overview, very clear and succinct. And thank you, DCR, for the good overview of the new program. Excited about that. So the CSP annual payment, there's two components to it. The first one is the existing activity. So you know how Dan talked about how many resource concerns you have met, like kind of when you sign up, is your stand appropriately stocked? Do you have concentrated erosion? Probably not. Do you have a fire risk? Probably not. How's your soil quality? Usually pretty good in the forest. Unless maybe you've had some rough logging experiences. But so that's how that part of the payment is based on, is how good are you doing right now? And then the second part is basically, what did you decide to do? Are you going to just do, create a few snags? And I think that was like $80 an acre, and you do 3 acres. All right, that's $240. Or are you going to do more? And each of this is by land use. So if you have 2 land uses, your payment's going to be higher than if you only have forest land. But I think most forest landowners typically just have forest land. You might have some associated ag, kind of some brush hogged fields that you just brush hog annually. Now, agriculture is eligible for this, but that's in a separate application, a separate contract than forest. So anyone out there with farmland, please reach out to us as well. You can sign up for CSP or our other program, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, which I'm going to call EQIP from now on. All right, so advancing. So now the existing activity payment, there's a flat rate that pays $1,800 per land use. And then there's a payment for the amount of resource concerns you've met. So okay, so those categories that you can get paid for, it's not, we had 47 resource concerns. It's only a set number of categories, specific categories that are eligible for payment. And Dan did show them before, but so you can see the concentrated erosion, fire, pest, plant condition, pest pressure. So, if you got invasive species that are on your property pretty, besides just a little bit, that's probably not a category that's going to be considered met. I'm going to finish the poll so it gets off my screen here. Go Taylor. All right. And so then if you happen to have associated ag land, and again, that might be one of those old fields that you're just brush hogging annually, or like a really large herbaceous wetland that's part of your forested tract, that could be a separate land use. So there's the categories that get you eligible for payment. And if you have multiple land uses, you can get that $1,800 for the non-historically underserved, and I'll explain that in a minute. $3,000 for the historically underserved participants per land use. So just an example here, you got your flat rate of $1,800. The number of resource concerns met, they've kind of based it this year on these levels. So if you meet 2 to 3, I think it's quite easy to meet 2 or 3 in terms of fire, soil quality, concentrated erosion probably. You get a payment of $3.50 per acre times your acreage. And so your payment would be $1,900 for that kind of lowest level. If you meet all the resource concerns, you're up to the $2,200, a higher payment rate per acre. But you see the bulk of the payment comes out of that flat rate. And so for the historically underserved participants, that $3,000 really bumps it up. The dollar per acre price is not that much higher. It's a little bit higher than the non-historically underserved. So their maximum for this 57 acres, which I thought was about the average acreage for private forest landowner in the state, would be about $3,400. And just to explain, okay, so, and then we would add what you guys decide to do on your property. So then that would get added to this annual payment. And this $1,900 here, $1,999, that's per year. So if your planned activities didn't add up to $4,000, then the $4,000 minimum payment would apply. Okay, so I had HU on that previous slide. So HU is the historically underserved farmers and ranchers. And there's 4 kind of categories listed here. The limited resource, beginning often applies for forest land, which means that you've owned forest land for no more than 10 years. So less than or equal to 10 years. Socially disadvantaged and veteran. So you can Google it, and we can put some links in the chat after, but if you just Google HU and NRCS, you can get some detailed information on, if you fit into the HU category. So I said there's the existing payment, and then there's the planned activity payment, what you decide to do. So this is just an example showing maybe this person decided to create structural diversity with patch openings, and they decided to do 2 acres of it. Maybe, two different 1 acre openings to create some habitat. And that pays $689 an acre. And they decided they wanted to do 4 brush piles, maybe make 2 brush piles per acre, which is our recommended amount. And then do 1 large nesting box for those barred owl lovers out there. So you can see basically the payment per unit. That the barred owl box doesn't pay very well, but they can use their existing payment money, some of that, up to the $4,000 to help pay to get that done. But so this is an example. The planner would work with you to develop what you want to do and what fits on your property. And then, like Dan said, we talk about what are the requirements to get that done, give you a kind of a implementation requirement job sheet. So you know what needs to be done. You work with your forester to make sure that these things make sense on the land. And you must do an activity in the first 12 months. That's one of the rules. So oftentimes we might, if it's appropriate for your land, plan like a bird box or an owl box for that first year, because that's something that's easy to get done. And you might wonder about these $689.39. Where did that come from? Well, NRCS uses payment schedules that are developed at the regional level. It's considered an average cost to accomplish that practice. It's not, it's not gonna be the highest cost or the lowest cost. So it's your responsibility to figure out, and maybe talking with your forester or just your own resources, what's it gonna cost me to do this? They're gonna give me this much, and it's per acre. It's not per acre or per brush pile. And you only get paid for doing for what the acreage or number that you get done. But, is it going to be cost effective for me to do this project? And so if it costs you less, you still get that rate. And if it costs you more, you still get that rate. It's just a flat payment rate. And again, it's per unit. So, yeah. So just to kind of sum it up, we got the 57 acres of forest land. They met 4 of the resource concern categories. And they decided to plan the 3 activities that I mentioned. And they're not historically underserved. So in 2024, they get their existing payment that I mentioned, the $2,096. In that first year, they decided to do the owl box. So their payment is $2,112. So an additional payment would apply to get it up to that $4,000. And then, so you decide when you want to do things, with the exception of something needs to be done in the first year. And the minimum is to do at least 1 activity. And to make sure that you move a resource concern up. If you only met 2, you got to get up to 3. But if you meet 3, then it's just pick something that you want to do that we feel it fits on your land and is appropriate. So yeah, in 2025, they decided to do those patch openings and then the brush piles in those openings. So their payment is $3,500, $3,556. And additional payment applies of $444 to get up to that $4,000. And the rest of the year, they don't have anything planned. So I think you see how it works. Yeah, and glad to see the resources with the climate. I know people are having trouble getting trees cut and out of the woods this year. So we do have practices in EQIP for forest trails and landings and erosion control and that kind of thing. So maybe there'll be a little more interest in that as we move forward. That would be better under the EQIP. And then just showing if you did have, I spoke about the old fields that are brush hogged, you know, they're not hayed, so it's not considered agricultural land. It's can be considered associated ag land. So in this situation, basically I just added as if they had 8 acres of old field that we're going to call associated ag land. So they have two land uses. So they're going to get that second kind of bigger chunk for the existing activity payment. And then they decided to do a couple bluebird boxes in year 3. And so that still they didn't even quite meet the minimum payment. So how the assistance works, contact local farm service agency. I know there's a lot of people on here who've done EQIP in the past. And again, that's Environmental Quality Incentive Program. You can think of EQIP as like the one that's more for addressing lots of problems, and Conservation Stewardship Program is more for rewarding like the good work that's been done. And I have a slide after Rick talks, but you can do both of them at the same time. But so if you're not signed up with FSA, you need to sign up with Farm Service Agency as an ag producer. They've got 2 main eligibility forms. One's a highly erodible land and wetland conservation form, and then adjusted gross income form. This farm bill says it's less than 900,000, I think. So contact NRCS to start the process of developing your conservation plan and applying for funding. Submit an application for your program of interest. You can also find the application on our website, so you can submit an application at any time. Complete a direct deposit form. Yeah, a few other forms with NRCS, but things are done electronic. And the application deadlines are established per national guidance. And basically, we just encourage you, there's a lot of interest here, so to kind of start thinking about stuff and requesting assistance and planning now. And so we're almost done here. So the applications are ranked and are funded in ranking order from the highest to the lowest ranking score until the funds are exhausted. So I would imagine someone who meets a lot of resource concerns when they sign up and agree to do several things and move more of those resource concerns to met is going to rank higher than someone that maybe only meets the minimum and just does like one activity. So a little less likely to get funded there. We do have a lot of funding, but we also have a lot of interest. So, and there'll be lots of funding next year as well. The payment, that minimum $4,000 is issued annually after October 1st for the existing activity payment and for any practices or enhancements that were implemented up to that point. And again, the practices need to be implemented according to the plan, according to the specifications that were all agreed on. So, you know, we can't pay if it wasn't done properly. And like I said, you got to do one thing within the first 12 months. We can work with you to try to do something, you know, on the simpler side. Let's see, additional minimum payment for minimum actually means. Could you review what the additional minimum? Yeah, I just want to cover this part here. It's important. Be aware that you'll get a 1099. So this is considered taxable income. And we're not tax advisors, so consult with your tax advisor on, you know, how you handle the payments. And I don't see this being a problem, but no more than $200,000 over the initial contract period. So this, the minimum again is just the CSP pays, maybe kind of make it fair for small landowners, large landowners. So basically there's a minimum payment. If you only really qualify for, like I show here, $2,100 a year, well, that gets bumped up to $4,000 per year. And then these are 5-year contracts. And in that 5 years, you agree to maintain the existing condition and then the plan condition, and anything that you do, they have lifespan. So you agree to maintain that in its condition. So, you know, it's not just free money. It's a payment to reward you for your good stewardship. And, you know, the ask is to continue to do that. All right. Yeah, so ranking, taxes, and we'll put in, I'm going to put in the chat a link to FSA and NRCS. And, you know, your offices are based on your counties. And I'm going to give Richard, which I think we can call him Rick Marble, a chance to get, hopefully we can get him off of mute. And he was our gracious, willing landowner that would speak for a few minutes here about his experience with the Conservation Stewardship Program. Okay, so hopefully my helpers are helping that happen. Okay. All right. We got Rick queued up. Let's see. And if there's any other questions that I should address while we get this going. I don't think I had any poll questions after I screwed up the last one.
Kate, there's a little bit of chatter on the chat about people that have forest management plans, but maybe their foresters didn't put climate smart practices in there. And they're just wondering, they don't want to have to go get a new forest management plan, but if you could speak to what their options are, that might be answering a couple of questions in there.
Okay. Oh, here's Rick. I think you're off. You're available anyways, right? Allow mic. Okay. Maybe I'll answer that question after if you're ready to go, Rick.
All right, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Awesome.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. So Kate asked if I would offer a few words as to my own experience, or my experience and my wife's experience with NRCS, and specifically with this Conservation Stewardship Program. And so I can do that. And I'd like first to acknowledge the assistance that we've received from day one. So as you can see from the slide, we have some 68 acres in Orange, Massachusetts, The total acreage has been in my family for a very long time. On my maternal grandfather's side. And the property has always meant something to us, but I think it's only when we came back to live in Central Mass that we began to understand that for the future, for our children and for the benefit of the community, we needed to have something in the way of a plan. So we met a state forester. We enrolled in Chapter 61. We were introduced to and were very well served by a private forester. And I've read some of the chats where some people have clearly had difficulty finding appropriate partners. So what I tried to say at the beginning is, I'll repeat, is that we were very lucky to get subject matter experts who had not only an understanding of land practices, but took the time to walk us through the property and look at what some of our goals might be. So essentially, we had a harvest cut. We had some 10 acres devoted to early successional habitat. We have a stream that runs through the property. There was a wetland area that was pretty well occupied by glossy buckthorn. And so we had a treatment plan for glossy buckthorn. And when we dealt with USDA-NRCS, there was a gentleman there by the name of Bill Breed, who worked in concert with our forester, Michael Berry. And between the two of them, they made the recommendations as to what we might do in order to improve the habitat, in order to plan for the future with regard to not only existing trees, but what we might look for in the future. And so it was in the fall of 22 that I got a call from Bill Breed at NRCS. He mentioned the Conservation Stewardship Program, and he asked whether or not we would be interested. So we attended a webinar similar to this. And then we picked a couple of plans that we thought made sense for our own parcel. Coming off a harvest, understanding that, for myself and a chainsaw and a brush saw, 68 acres is a lot to manage. I didn't want necessarily to have a forestry company come back in. So we picked a couple of things that we thought would make good sense. One was reasonably easy. Was a barred owl box that we were able to construct, put on the property. It was kind of fun. They needed to be the better part of a quarter of a mile apart, one from the other. They needed to be 35 feet up in a tree. They were rather unwieldy, but I found a cousin, if you will, who had a son who had just completed a lineman's training course in Georgia for a matter of months. And so I needed someone young, strong, and with climbing ability. And with his assistance back in the fall, we were able to put 2 barred owl boxes up. The next thing that we're going to attend to is an oak regeneration plan on some 20 acres of the property. And early in this program, I think perhaps when Mike Downey was speaking, I think like many of you, we look at the property and we say, okay, the great hemlock stands that we had, are they going to be a species that does well in the future? Ash, ash has its problems. So we settled on oak. We think that in the habitat that we have the ability, we hope we have the ability to create some new forest that will withstand some of the rigors that will be coming our way here in the next number of years. So in short, we're a couple who has property that we're most gracious to have. We understood that a plan made good sense over simply doing nothing. We were encouraged by and able to work with subject matter experts, and the entire process has been reasonably easy. So if that is of any help, I can only offer our own assessment that we've been well served. We're pleased. We look forward to spending more time on the property, and we're quite anxious to see what we might look like in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. And we appreciate, and I know I speak for DCR and Mike as well, your interest and your enthusiasm for working the land and being involved and planning. So I thank you for that, and thank you for your interest in the CSP and also providing your experience there. And I was just going to point out, like, this is an example of using the EQIP funding to create a larger area that's used by the chestnut-sided warbler, eastern towhees, other kind of shrubland birds like that. And then the invasives control, again, kind of a more expensive practice that we can help pay for through EQIP. I don't know if anyone had any questions for Rick. Feel free to put questions in the chat for Rick. Okay. Yeah. So one sec. With regard to the forest management plan that didn't prescribe climate practices, basically, if you're going to apply for something that involves cutting trees, your foresters and you are the experts on your land. So we want to tap into that experience and get their recommendation for a cutting practice. So we would just ask that maybe they do a quick, sometimes it's okay just to kind of write a brief narrative for our stance. Where is it located? Kind of the amount of trees that they recommend cutting. But if they can do a brief, short addendum, that's what we would want to see for any cutting practices. Any, if you wanted to apply for a practice involve cutting trees. When I say cutting practices, not necessarily Cutting Practices Act, which isn't always required if you're under a certain threshold, but we'll leave that to the service foresters. So someone with their hand up. Sorry, were you gonna put them off a mute or?
Kate, can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Okay, so I see a question about, how much brush was left on the ground? What was the condition of the property after the cut? And again, the forest company that came in was a company by the name of Anderson. They worked in concert with our forester. Again, his name was Michael Berry at the time, but the property was in good shape. We were fortunate to have freezing weather. They harvested in January of the year. There was brush left in some areas, but that which we're looking at right now is the early days of early successional habitat, as it says. And obviously shrubs, etc., thorns have started to come back in that area, but that's part and parcel of that, that habitat. So to the question of how was the property, how was the experience, I think we were fortunate again to have a logging company who was cautious in their approach, and the end result was favorable.
We don't have a specific practice for insecticide for healthy ash. I'll have my coworkers correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not something that I know about. Maybe DR could speak to what we do about ash in EAB briefly. I don't know if Mike, you want to talk about that briefly?
I can give you my kind of perspective. It doesn't really maybe necessarily answer specific, you know, parcel or landowner concern, but I would say from a forestry standpoint, you know, there's some research coming out of the Midwest that, you know, maintaining some genetic lifeboating of ash is a really smart thing to think about as a landowner. And, you know, so lifeboating of ash, you can think of it in a number of different ways, but one way of doing that is making sure that you maintain some ash, so it has its ability to seed. And then if you do cut ash, preferably cutting it when it has the ability to stump sprout, because that's a genetic lifeboat option as well. So I think from my perspective, at least some of the research that's coming out of the Midwest that's over 20 years old is indicating that we don't need to necessarily cut every single ash, because there are some opportunities where that first wave of emerald ash borer comes through and there are some survivors. So that's the research that I'm aware of. There's probably people in the audience that completely think that I'm a fool, and I'm willing to accept that because probably I am. But I just think that there's opportunities for genetic lifeboating, and I would encourage folks to at least consider that as an option.
Thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
you can back me up on invasive species here. So we have now opened up our brush management practice to cutting. You know, basically it's good to think about a comprehensive invasive species management plan. You know, what are your goals with the invasive species? Kind of what's your tolerance for the different methods? We know there's chemicals. There's someone asked about fire or burning. There's pulling plants out by the roots. You know, I don't always think that's a great idea in the forest where you have sort of intact, you know, roots, and to get heavy equipment in there and pluck out bushes. I'm not sure that's always the best thing to do. So, you know, herbicide is going to be your most effective, but will now allow paying for just cutting them down, and knowing that really it's not gonna get rid of them. Maybe it sets down a heavy lift that first year for some really big bushes that you can then kind of brush cut on a smaller acreage. The fire, the propane, I'm not an expert, but I understand the work that was done out of the Connecticut Ag Experiment Station looked mostly at barberry as being a viable option to cut those down and use some fire on the crowns as a way to control them. I don't believe it's going to work for your bittersweets, your buckthorns, and probably your rose bushes, and maybe it would work with honeysuckle. But we can consider all options, but just recognizing that different methods are going to have different levels of control. Now there is the hands. I don't know.
You can unmute them if you want.
Andy, do you have a question there? Oh, oops, sorry. Holy cow. I've taken some people, giving you the ability to talk. So if you want to go in order there, Andy.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, all right. So this is Vanessa Russell. And so we're in a conservation program right now. And the next 2 years, I'm finding it, I'm having a hard time financing what we have to do. So is this something that's going to help us finance our future projects?
So these, yeah. So these, you're wondering about financing like your NRCS project that you signed up for, like the other amount that the payment's not going to cover?
Yeah, well, I mean, these people that are doing the services on our property are going to want to get paid before, say, we get paid like in October. So, I mean, how are we going to be able to afford to do these, you know, projects and pay these people in a timely fashion, you know,
Okay.
before we get reimbursed for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. It's a good question. The one thing that comes, yeah, because it's a good question. Our payments are always after you complete them. I believe there's an exception for the historically underserved participants can apply for an advance payment, and I'm just going to stop at that, and I'll let someone else put in the chat, one of my coworkers that knows it better. So there is an opportunity for the historically underserved, but my strategy with CSP may be, and that's not going to help you if you're in a program, I'm sorry. But I suppose just to answer the question for others, with CSP, maybe you just do something simple in that first year, like a bat owl box that's not going to cost too much. You get the payment for that, you get the $4,000, and then you can use that $4,000, I'm thinking out loud, to help pay to do something that you might have planned in the second or third year. And then also maybe just like recognize your, you know, try not to sign up for things that is going to be too much. Some of our contractors, they're not our contractors, but we've seen in the past, maybe with the invasive species control contractors, that they're willing to just get paid after they do the work. But yeah, with CSP, where that payment comes not until the fall, which that could actually work out for invasive species control. But yeah, something to think about, and I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm sorry if it doesn't help with your situation. There are some conservation groups that will give like bridge loan funding, but. Okay, I think there's 3 people with their hands up, and you can all speak. So if you want to, one at a time.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bill. You talked a little bit about the ash. Michael, you were talking about ways to deal with the ash. So I saw a couple of questions in the chat, and I had the same thing, was about dealing with beech trees and this problems that the beaches are having. Is there an effective plan for that?
I'm probably not the expert to speak on that, so there might be somebody else, but you know, I think I'll just give you my perspective on what's facing the forest, and maybe this isn't going to answer your question, but I think we've made some errors in the past. You can think of American chestnut, you can think of other things that have come through our forest that have been invasive and very devastating. And I would just advocate for us to think holistically about not necessarily a human lifespan, and think about that these forests are evolving and changing genetically in other ways that we'll never fully understand. And my opinion of it is that this idea of wide-scale sanitation cuttings to solve a specific infestation may not necessarily be always the best thing. There are examples where that statement is not true. Asian longhorn beetle would be that example, because that is a devastating insect that inherently will be destructive. But in terms of these other insects where mortality comes and fungal pathogens, let's give the chance to the tree to kind of figure it out. If we can help them, hemlock woolly adelgid, if we had this conversation in 1996 when I was first becoming a forester, the common conversation was, we need to cut all the hemlock because it's all going to die. Well, we still have hemlock here in the state. And there's clear evidence, there's clear research that shows that we can do things silviculturally, forest management wise, that will inherently make those hemlock trees more resistant and resilient to that critter. You know, when we mix in elongate scale, it becomes more complicated, obviously. You know, just like everything, there's no simple answer. There's no one size fits all, as I mentioned before. But as when it comes to beech leaf disease, I think we're trying to figure it out. And I don't have an answer for that because it's brand new. And I have beech in my forest that, you know, I care for, and it's devastating to think that we're going to lose a critically important mass producing tree. So I don't have a good answer for that, but I would say that, you know, preemptively cutting all the trees because we're afraid of something. Let's take a deep breath. Let's get the people that are smarter than me, because I'm just a guy talking. Get the folks. We have DCR Forest Health Program, wonderful resources that can help you answer these questions scientifically. And those are the experts I would bring into your property. And that's a simple phone call to your service forester that can relay that message to the DCR Forest Health Program and help answer these questions in the best way we can, because it's a moving target. And you know, that's why these resources are available. They're free. I would reach out to your service forester. It's one of the easiest phone calls, text message, emails, however you want to reach out to them. We have a ton of free resources that can get you the answers. And there's research, the research is changing. Just even about climate, it's changed in the 5 years when we started this conversation about climate. So to think that I know everything right now today would be ignorant on my part, but I can get you somebody who's smarter than me. I can tell you that for a fact.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Like,
You still have any hands up? Let's see. I got a allow mic. Let's see. Okay, Lise. Go ahead, either Lise or James Downey.
Sorry. All right, Lisa's here. It took me a while in Teams to find where my mic was. So I have, Mike knows I have a bunch of different questions, but I'm gonna try to focus it on kind of this whole CSP and the equip. You know, we have a forest management plan. It's written mostly around our young successional cut, and then on 3 of the other stands is on pretty much invasive work. And I'm beginning to realize that some of the things that we want to do might fall under this category of invasive work, because that's kind of written in. It's just a simple one, but because we're trying to do climate work, our main concern is around all these invasive species. And just what we should do. We don't know what we should do. And I think what Mike said is very important. We don't want to rush into doing things. We're not trying to get rid of our trees, but we have talked about in-planting. And so when Rick talked about the forest, the oak regeneration, I started to look at that. But there's other things that we have in our unique situation. We have a pond. We're a homeowners or a landowners association. So our forests circle a pond, which is now, it was built back in the 70s through Beaver Dam work that could never be done again today. But we now have this pond, and we want to care for it. We care for it in as many ways as we can. We have very few invasives in it. And I'm just wanting to figure out, can work that we want to do in the pond to make sure that we're dealing with, you know, good watershed management around it, to make sure that, you know, the species we do have are supported within that pond. does the pond get is part of our forest management plan? Can the pond be worked on as well? Because I'm just seeing, we're trying to figure out what we should do. And so I think we need to go and get somebody to come out and look. And I know Adam is on the line, our consulting forester here. So I know he's learning around this. You know, so we're all just trying to figure out what is it that we need to do, should do, not do. But I want to figure it all out. So one, does our pond can we do work around our pond? Fish pond management, if we're trying to continue with that, and can climate work be connected to this invasive species work in the CSP or the EQIP?
Okay, let me just speak to the pond thing. So, Lisa, so depending on the size of the pond, if it's considered a great pond here in Massachusetts, there's certain protections over it, and actually the DCR lakes and ponds.
It's not a great pond.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't fall into great pond.
Okay, so strike any of my further comments then. So yeah, so don't worry about that. You know, you will definitely need to, you know, if you're doing something within that water body or within the buffer zone under the Wetlands Protection Act, you'll need to probably at least have a conversation with your conservation agent, would be my thought on that. And then I'll just speak from you know, this is a brand new program that we rolled out tonight. Okay, this is the first, you know, we're talking, the program's 4 hours old.
Right.
So the Climate Stewardship Incentive Program, just to kind of clue folks in, I know I went through it really fast, but it's the foundation of that program is based upon a forest cutting plan, which is not your management plan. It's a regulatory device. It's a permit issued by the state forester,
right,
for harvesting activity on land that's to remain forested. And so that forest cutting plan basically opens up the door for those practices. So you can either apply, you know, as you know, you may have an already existing forest cutting plan that's already approved. We can welcome your application now. If you don't have one, you can still submit an application. However, we're just asking that you submit a cutting plan shortly thereafter.
That's one of the things I learned tonight, Mike. Because we don't have a cutting plan right now. We don't anticipate a cutting plan right now. So I realize that the new program that you spoke of tonight is not part of us. But in the CSP, I've pulled up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different possible enhancements or part of those bundles. And it's like looking at these things, I don't know what you know, can we do these things? Are we eligible for these things? You know, everything from pollinators, you know, beneficial insects, monarch habitats, all these things are kind of fit into our plan, but I don't know how we really make this work with NRCS and how we move forward on finding out which of any of these plans we're eligible to do and if they would fit. You know, we've got plenty of acres, we've got plenty of forest. So, you know, how do we make those determinations when there's so many? I mean, there's so many out there. How do we move forward? What's the first step to do that?
All right, Lisa, I'm going to let Kate answer that. We got a couple more folks that are wanting to ask some questions as well. So thanks.
Yeah, I think basically just quickly, you could look through the guide sheets and really see like that the details, and maybe they don't all apply to your situation. And then also, like, you know, the planners are going to be a little more familiar with them than you, and they can help coach, like, well, you know, that one maybe not so good, or so. And then also maybe don't think too big, like you don't want to overwhelm yourself. You can apply to this program again another time. Those are just kind of some quick thoughts. Like we don't want people to sign up for too much and then find that they can't accomplish it. But I guess just kind of studying, and then also like the ones that involve cutting, talking with your forester, do these make sense? Yeah. All right, anyone else?
We got two more folks, Kate. There's a James Downey and an Andy that would like to talk to you, or maybe
Okay.
me, or somebody else.
Is that your uncle?
Possibly.
All right, I think they can both speak if they want. I didn't know the Chiefs were the underdog next week. Okay. Oh wow. Allow mic for Jonathan and Amy. And feel free, as people are signing off when you want to go. We appreciate your coming today.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I've got a question. I've got a fair percentage of my forest land is in APR. Does that affect the CSP program?
Nope.
Okay. And the other question is, moving forward with the planning, you said there's planners available. What is the first step? Filling out the application, and where do we get that, et cetera, et cetera? I already have a cutting plan and a forest management plan in place.
Okay. I think that's the most direct way would be to call the NRCS office. So are you Franklin County or?
I have two. I live in Franklin County. I have a farm there where I'm in partnership with my brother, and then I have one in Hampshire County in Cummington.
Okay. That's above my pay grade of figuring out which one's which, but
Hampshire County is the one I'd want to start dealing with. That's where I've got more things in place.
Yeah, I would call them, say I want to apply for this program, and I don't know if I get in trouble, but it doesn't hurt to. I can put the link to the application. Doesn't hurt to fill out an application if you're pretty serious about applying. So I'll put the link to our application here. And give NRCS a call and say you want to apply for CSP.
Okay. Sounds
perfect. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure if you mentioned, but March 8th, 2024 is our next CSP application deadline. So I just wanted to say that out loud. And to the gentleman that just was asking, I assume that you've already established your records with FSA, because that's probably going to be the first step once you get through the service center door.
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Okay, that might be part of your process.
Okay. But the first step is to call the NRCS office.
Yes.
And speak with someone about the CSP program.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So it's Jim Downey. Can I just ask two quick questions? One, I think is already answered. So we do not need to have a cutting plan in place to be eligible for these programs, correct?
For our program, you don't, because your activity you might pick might not involve needing one, or maybe you don't need one at all. So for our stuff, you don't necessarily have to. If you're going to cut a bunch of trees, then you could get it afterwards, after you kind of get in talking with us.
Yeah, but the preference would be not to cut trees. Okay, so then the second part is for the subsidies, are there income eligibility requirements?
Okay,
like
so
you sort of alluded to something like you could disqualify yourself based on income or something. I just didn't understand that.
Yeah, it's a maximum, and we can put a link, but I believe it's a max. You can't your adjusted gross income, the average over the previous 3 years can't exceed $900,000 per year. Yeah, I want to make it clear that it's not like a minimum level. It's a maximum level. Yeah. So there's a form that we're going to follow up maybe with the recording, and we can put some more links out to people.
Okay. All right. And we're Hampshire County as well. So I'll follow up with the representative there.
Okay.
Thank you. This is very helpful.
You're welcome.
Hey, could you answer Andy's question? I guess he's been on, had his hand up for a while. Thank you.
Yeah. I think he's can talk. Are you there, Andy? Sorry. Yeah, you can speak. It says your mic is available. We can't hear you.
Andy, the mic is at the top right side of this corner of the screen.
Well, Andy, you got my email, so if you we can't hear you, you can email me your question. Kate Parsons there, Kate.Parsons, that's at USDA.gov. Okay, does not seem. Yeah, they had that question about the timing of your grant program, Mike, that it's got to be done by the 31st of May. Oh, I don't know if you guys already answered that.
No, it's imperfect. You know, this is a pilot rollout. It's not going to work out perfectly because the money's tied to the state fiscal year, and I all I can do is apologize for that. We're hopeful that it will roll into fiscal year 25. So I believe the process would be that if for some reason, if you're applying for some assistance and can't get to, you know, I'm thinking the invasive species, obviously, that's the big one. If that project can't get completed by the deadline, you know, it's a fairly simple process. We would just move your application into the following fiscal year funding, which would start July 1. And we'd just move the project into that fiscal year. So I apologize for that. It's not perfect. It's, you know, we operate on a fiscal year, and it makes it difficult to deliver programming really effectively because sometimes it doesn't align with what you guys need to do on the ground, and I apologize for that. All right, I'm gonna try to get Andy off of unmute one more time here.
He keeps.
He's been sending me some emails, and I'm trying to do my best here. So,
Okay.
Andy, if you can find, if you're on your phone, I can't tell if you're on the phone or the computer. If you're on the computer, you'll notice there's right next to the red leave button, a couple of to the left of that is a microphone. If you can just click on that to unmute, then you can ask your question, or if you want to call me on my cell phone, feel free, if it's a question for me. I'll be here for another few minutes, so feel free to call me on my cell phone if it's about something I can be helpful with.
Yeah, I guess we still got a number of people here, but this is a overwhelming response of interest. So I just wanted to say if you don't get funded this year, there'll be funding again next year and the year after and the year after. This higher level of funding, and probably the reason they increased the annual payment, minimum payment is coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act bill. So this funding, it will be around for, I can't remember if it's 8 to 10 years or so. So just, yeah, it's the nature of programs. There's not usually enough money to go around. So if you can try to be patient, and we'll do our best. Yeah, and I'll send the link to the online application when we send out the email tomorrow or Wednesday morning. Bye. Let's see. We had another question here. Let's see. Oh, dog. Now I can't see.
It's me, Kate. You were
Okay.
already on. So you said you were going to send out a link for the recording. How are you sending that out? How can we expect to get it?
I'm not sure. Because that's quite a large file. You know what? I think last year's webinar that we did is, you can still see it, I believe, on YouTube. So we do have like an all employee, much of the staff is in a meeting tomorrow, but between all of us, we'll try to get it posted as soon as possible, and email you to let you know.
Kate, maybe
post on
we can.
YouTube and link to the email and send to everybody.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe we can email out the slides. I know Diane used to have to do something to it before we published it to YouTube for ADA compliance. So, Soraya, I don't know if you know that procedure, but I think that might take a little time to process.
Okay. Yeah, we'll work on the slides, the slide deck, and then the recording as soon as possible, and then let you know with a follow-up email.
Hey, can I ask you a question from Andy?
Yes.
All right. So Andy's question to me was, does NRCS have some assistance for his family to help with, fixing an old road, or, fixing, infrastructure to get, to manage their forest? So like old skidder roads and things like that, or,
Yep.
it may be an access road possibly as well. Is that something that you guys could help Andy with?
Yes, I'll give it the first stab. Typically out in the woods, we aren't bringing gravel in. We have a practice called the forest trails and landing, and typically the main cost is for water bars. We could certainly share, like, first I'd have Andy contact the office and we could take a look, but there's $1 per probably linear foot or square foot for the forest trail. And you could see how much work you could get done with that dollar amount. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to be covering it as well as some of our other practices. But definitely something that sounds like it could be eligible. And again, we're not really talking about bringing gravel out and, fabric and that kind of thing out in the woods. We will pay for access road to get to the landing, off of the town road, but then from the landing up into the woods, it's typically our forest trails and landings, which, is just kind of more shaping and grading.
Okay, yeah, because I think that's more aligned with what Andy's family's looking for, is kind of coming off of the town road.
Okay.
So yeah, Andy, if you can hear me, definitely reach out to Kate and NRCS, and if you guys can think of any other programs that might work for him in terms of access, assistance, please help. I think that's what he's mainly looking for.
Okay.
Kate, if I can just add in there, just because it's come up recently, you do have to have control of the land where you're accessing from the town road, because we can't go over somebody else's property. It probably goes without saying, but sometimes it doesn't. So.
Okay. Yeah, and Andy, you could email me or call Mike and we can, if you want to talk about it more. Yeah, I think Bill, your question was answered, right? You can speak if you have another question.
It was answered. Thanks.
Okay. All right. I think we got through the questions. I don't know. There might be some in the chat we missed, but if anyone's there, and just reach out to me or call. I mean, call your local office is the preference to get really working with the plan. Those are the planners that'll work with you. If you kind of have a higher level question or whatnot on CSP, feel free to email me. All right. Thank you, Mary.
NEC is New England Cottontail. Saw that come through a few times.
Okay.
I don't think we miss any question in the chat.
Yeah, perfect. Wow. It's 8:02. I figured it'd probably go till about 8. I don't know if that's Mike's real living room there, but he's got an empty table. Thank you, Zariah, we didn't give a shout out to Zariah. She's our new public affairs person that helped us set up this webinar. Very gracious for her help.
Glad we got it done, and we had about 250 people.
Nice. Awesome. All right. Well, shall we? Well, we
Stop the
should.
recording before you end.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to stop the recording now. Good call. Stop recording.